Hey guys, and welcome back to Rush Royale. And today, as you can see, I got Boreas, and that was pretty sweet. So I've been waiting for Boreas to come into the shop for a long time, and I was finally able to get Boreas, and I decided to pick that card up just because it's still a card that I see so often, and I really wanted to have it in my collection to make videos with and just to play with. So I'm super excited that I was finally able to get it, and now I'm curious to try it out in a bunch of different decks to see what works best, because there are a number of different Boreas strategies out there. I know it's not top meta compared to Thunderer at the moment, but it's still a card that I see used super frequently, even if it's not at the very top meta. It's still a card I see used a lot, and pretty much by far the three sort of damage cards that I see used the most are probably Engineer, Boreas, and Thunderer. But I feel like I'm at a point, or I've been starting to get to a point with trophies where I'm encountering more Boreas and Thunderer than a lot of other things. So, and less Engineers than I was encountering under 4,000 trophies. So, Boreas still seems to be fairly entrenched as, you know, an alternative meta option, it seems like. Especially for people who, I'd say Boreas and Inquisitor as non-Thunderer options, although Thunderer still seems to be superior, but I still see these used a lot for whatever reason, just to mix it up or whatever. But Boreas is just a good card to have for a number of reasons, partly because, again, it does good damage, and it's important to have good damage cards in your deck, or at least some sort of good damage card. Be it Boreas, Thunderer, Engineer, Inquisitor, whatever it's going to be, you kind of need to have a card that can deal some pretty good damage. And Boreas is one of those cards, so it's handy to have it in my collection for trying different types of decks. So I'm very, very happy to have it. And it works really well in the early game. Boreas is it holds up extremely well in the early game. It's super consistent. It doesn't require as much maintenance as Engineer strategies do. At least in the early game it doesn't, but in the late game I found it doesn't hold up as well against Engineers or like Inquisitors or Thunderer as you might think it can, but like, I don't know. It can get a little overwhelmed. And it does extremely well though in the early game. I think it's just sometimes for me, I don't scale. It doesn't scale quite as well. Whereas when they get these huge linked Engineer things together, they can start to scale well. And the Inquisitors can scale well with their ability. Whereas Boreas feels kind of like a one-trick pony. Like, it does what it does really well, but the main way to take it to endgame is to put something with it. You know, I think to put something with Boreas, like, you know, like I'm gonna try Hex. I think Hex could be a good option. Oof, I took a lot there. I should have probably combined my stuff because I lost a bunch of stuff to Tribunal there. That was rough. But yeah, I think that some sort of supporting card is needed for Boreas in order for it to actually be endgame effective against some of these trickier strategies that my opponents may employ. But I do think it's potentially better against, say, like Shaman than, like, I think Engineer decks can be very susceptible to Shaman just because it can break their links very easily. Shaman can also be really susceptible. Engineer can also be really susceptible to Bedlam if you can't take out Bedlam quick enough. Well, really a lot of bosses can cause problems for Engineer. Tribunal can cause problems for it. So there are certain advantages to having really one card that does all your damage. One of those advantages being that it's cheaper to power it up since you don't necessarily need the other cards to be ranked up as much as you just need that one damage card to be ranked up. So if Puppeteer happens, you can get your levels back up more cheaply. Because for example, I don't upgrade Harlequin and I don't upgrade Mime here, so it's really just like Stasis and Vampire. Stasis is an interesting card, and I've been kind of going back and forth on whether or not it's kind of good or kind of not good. Sometimes I think it's good, and then there's other times where I'm like, nah, it doesn't really provide enough benefit. I think it depends on what it's paired with and how good of a setup you get with it. Because obviously, Stasis isn't doing the damage for you. It's really just slowing things down. But I've definitely had some matches where Stasis seemed pretty, like it worked pretty well. It just kind of depended on if I had the right ratio of like Stasis versus other damage cards out there. But as you can see, my opponent is really doing better than me in this match. And their engineers have just scaled better than my sort of full board tactic here with Boreas plus Stasis. So I think in order to win this match, I may have to merge some things and try to get some higher tiered damage cards, because it doesn't seem like the ones I have right now are going to cut it. Although actually I'm doing okay. The non-boss rounds are where Stasis can really pay off, because sometimes it can slow down the cards enough. I mean, sorry, the sort of mobs enough that even if you're not doing as well as your opponent, it can reach, you know, if you're both going to lose, you have the advantage and they'll lose first because they'll reach their castle first. So I do really enjoy Stasis' effect, but like many other support cards, it's the type of card where you have to have like just the right ratio of them out there to damage cards to try and be successful with it. And there we go. I was able to pick up a win actually with that Stasis against the Engineer deck. Stasis and Boreas against the Engineer deck. So it works in some situations. In most of these matches some of these I was using Vampire, and Vampire pretty useful in terms of getting mana generation, but it can also be a problem because there can reach a certain point where, especially when I have a deck such as this with just Boreas, after I max out Boreas, I don't really need mana the same way for most of the other upgrades. I don't need to upgrade Mime or Harlequin really, I don't think. And Vampire, once it's upgraded, so I do upgrade Stasis, but other than that, I mean, you know, there comes a certain point where I feel like Vampires are not useful anymore in the match once you get to a certain part of the end game, I feel like. So it's like I have to either merge them back in or I'm stuck with something useless. And the real problem with this deck is that there's like 3 cards in here: Vampire, Mime, and Harlequin. And really Stasis too, partly, but at least those other 3 that are all completely useless from an offensive standpoint. And it really stacks a lot of pressure on getting Boreas merges, like merging into Boreas. And if I merge into like a tier 4 Vampire, I'm in trouble, or like a tier 4 Mime in particular, something like that, I'm in big trouble. And it puts a lot of pressure on my merging, and I have to be very careful with that. So, because I can certainly merge very easily with Harlequin and Mime, but if I merge the wrong thing, it could be a problem, and sometimes I can get bricked in the end game. I don't brick super often in the early game unless I don't get Boreas, but it's pretty easy to have a decent shot at getting one with both Mime and Harlequin, because, you know, I can pretty much, whatever is out there, unless I only get Stasis and Vampire, I'll at least be able to merge something. You know what I mean? So that can at least be useful. And Stasis does a good job of, you know, really holding things back so I can get a good look at it there. You know, do more damage to things as they go past. I'm wondering what Stasis would be like with Thunderer. That's one thing I kind of want to try, is like a Stasis Thunderer deck, because right now people are trying like everything with Thunderer because it just seems to be good with a lot of different things. So I definitely would like to try Stasis with that. It seems okay with Boreas, but I do think there are other better support cards probably for Boreas. I feel okay about Vampire, but the reality is, if I'm using both Harlequin and Mime, I can kind of just go ahead and use Priestess, because those are already cards that have good synergy with Priestess. So I kind of feel like maybe I should be using Priestess if I'm already using those two cards, since they have, again, they have good synergy with them, and, you know, just, I feel like Priestess, or I could use Priestess in addition even, I don't know. So I think it would be a little bit better than Vampire, especially since I would be, in many cases, attempting to merge out of the Priestess and not just having it sit on the board like Vampire, because then I have to manage how many Vampires are out there, and especially when I'm already wanting my slots to be mostly filled with either Boreas or Stasis. I don't really want to sacrifice a bunch of slots for Vampire, and with Priestess, the only slots I would have that in are ones where I merged into it. So that's the annoying thing about Vampire, is that it takes up slots on your board for something that isn't contributing any damage or even buffing anything. It's not doing anything except generating mana. So if you don't actually need the mana, it's kind of like, well, you know. Personally, I like Priestess a little bit better if you're running like Mime and Harlequin, but I think it depends on what your setup is. Obviously, if you don't want to run Mime and Harlequin, Vampire could be a lot more useful, because the big thing with Priestess is being able to copy it and combine it, in my opinion. So, because then you can really multiply the amount of mana that you're able to generate. And this has been a nice long match, but it's clear I'm behind in this match, so we'll see if Stasis can make up for that. It seems clear to me I should start merging, but when I was playing this match, I clearly wasn't quite thinking that. But yeah, I should definitely be merging here. I think I was afraid to merge into something bad, so I just kind of kept what I had out there, since it was mostly Boreas. And I was pretty new to Boreas when I was playing this match, so I think I didn't realize that I was going to need to merge up so far. I thought that, you know, those ones could do the trick, but I've been learning a lot since then, and I'm going to keep learning a lot with Rush Royale, so I'm excited to play some more. So leave a like if you enjoyed, let me know what you thought about this video in the comments, and what other types of content I should create. Maybe subscribe if you're new to my channel, and thanks for watching, guys, and stay tuned for more videos.